Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Winter Raptors today with Bill. And I know we're starting a little late, so I'm just going to let him get going. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, folks. It's nice to be back with Cary Library. I've been doing this for a while and always enjoy it. I'm the past president of the Friends of the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge. I'm still a board member and very active in that group. And I was the founding director of Mass Audubon's Joppa Flats Education Center in Newburyport. Well, I started bird watching in 1961, so I've been at this for a while, and certainly one of the groups of birds that has always interested me are the winter raptors. As I say, sort of the birds at the sort of the top of the food web, if you think of it that way. On my introductory slide here, I have a snowy owl. Now, this year has been pretty slow for snowy owls up where I am. I live up in the Newburyport area in Newburyport, and go out to Parker River National Wildlife Refuge and often. So that's good. Anyway, in terms of if you're a beginning birder or I think it's important to know about the American Ornithological Society. Those are those in theory are the experts on birds, bird names, the taxonomy, in other words, the relationship among all the birds, and they are the people that name the birds. They're responsible for doing that. And they make mistakes every once in a while, but they seem to, in time, clean it up. And the most recent supplement, notice this is supplement number 65. In other words, every year in about June, they make a new listing of the birds. And this could be changes in name in terms of common name or scientific name. I noticed when I was going through my lecture this morning that there were some changes in scientific name. Scientific names they're in Latin or have been Latinized. And so you have to have, if you have a genus name and it's female, you have to have the specific name also be female. And they made one change where apparently it was a neuter name and they made it a female name. But any case, so little things like that. And they also organize how things are related. So if you look at your bird books, typically, the birds at the beginning of the bird book are most closely related to the original dinosaurs. And in fact, birds are dinosaurs. We just call them birds. The only animals that have ever had feathers are dinosaurs and birds. And so it's their responsibility and to make naming both the common name and a scientific name, and also to put them in the correct order taxonomically. So the most ancient birds are at the beginning, the most modern birds are at the end. So that's one source I use, and the other thing is the Identification Guide to New North American Birds. This is a tome, it's about that thick, this is part two, by Peter Pyle at his association. And these are the people that generate all the information you need to know if you're a bird bander, okay? So those are the two primary sources, and all these photographs are mine. In terms of the presentation outline this morning or afternoon, we'll talk a look about some definitions, and then we'll talk about winter challenges. This is a tough time for birds of prey. We'll talk about physical adaptations. How are birds able to take advantage of their environment through physical and behavioral adaptations? And then we'll take a look at the species accounts. We'll look at those birds that are here year round. Now, they may not be very easy to see, but they are here, in fact, 12 months of the year. Then we have some winter residents. These are birds that we typically only see starting in November, and usually by the 1st of March, they're gone. So these are birds that are coming from the far north down. And then we have a small group of birds called eruptive species. In order to be called a migrant has to be annual. Their movements have to be annual and predictable. There are some birds that, so for example, if you wanted to see a northern gannet, I know with absolute certainty if I took you out to Cape Ann or the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge and looked out into the ocean in November, I'd see them every year migrating by. But some of these birds come into our area, but only very seldom. And so some years we have none of them, and some years we have a few of them. And those are eruptive species. Okay, so year-round residents of those species that are known to breed and overwinter in our area, things like a red-tailed hawk. Okay, we have resident winter residents. These are birds that are typically only in the fall, winter and early spring, as I said. And eruptive species are those that they show up every once in a while, and they're when they'll arrive, where they'll arrive, and how many of them will arrive is always a mystery until they show up. Okay? So in terms of winter challenges for all of these birds, especially for the young birds of prey, whether it's a eagle, a hawk of some kind, or an owl, the young raptors who are probably were fledged sometime in maybe late July, August sometime, well, they're only about 4 or 5 months old. And yet they're dealing with these really significant challenges of the very cold weather, trying to feed in sleet and snow and everything like that. And a lot of their prey animals are underneath the snow. So it's tough. If these young birds can make it through the first year, they're probably in pretty good shape. And again, they have to learn and perfect their hunting techniques during what's probably the most difficult time of year for them. And the challenges, of course, in inclement weather, they have to be able to maintain their body temperatures. Okay. And so often hunting is limited by snow, wind, whatever. And raptors during lean periods have to draw on their fat reserves. So that's why it's really important that they be feeding, because after some time they may have to go 3 or 4 days in really bad weather where they simply can't feed. And a lot of people will say, well, Bill, I saw some birds along the highway. And I've typically asked them, well, which side of the highway? And they sort of look at me, well, what difference does it make? And I say, well, because one side of the highway, the trees are typically brighter, more in the sun than on the other side. And so these raptors are not only sitting up in trees looking for some prey items, but they're also trying to find sunny spots to help them stay warm, conserve their body heat. The other thing winter challenges, just the whole act of attacking a prey animal, whether it's a squirrel or a skunk or something like that. Well, an animal does not want to die, okay, these prey animals, and so they will try to fight back, okay? The winter conditions, of course, will increase the chances of raptor may become disabled, okay? It could be weakened, it could be in a snow or attacking an animal in the snow. It may hit an object that is obscured that they don't see. And the fact of the matter is that a raptor that has a damaged wing, for example, faces death. Now, if you're a pigeon or mourning dove or something, and you injure, not break your wing, but just injure it slightly, you can walk around on the ground for a couple of days trying to avoid predators, but you can find some food. But if you're a pursuit hunting raptor, in other words, a raptor that chases its prey item, if you can't fly, you're in big trouble. So these are all major items. And a lot of many species of hawks and owls start their breeding process in the wintertime. Okay, so it's not unusual to see great horned owls and things like that on nests in January and February. So it's important that they keep up their body temperature, they keep up their appearance for courtship and breeding purposes. And they must be able to demonstrate to a potential mate that they are, in fact, healthy. Because why would a female bird who's going to make a huge investment in laying eggs want to mate with a male raptor who is not demonstrating a really good outward appearance? Because it shows that if he's healthy, looks healthy, then he's obviously been be able to find food, because she's going to want him to be able to find food for her and her young ones. So these are all things. In terms of hunting, they're basically pounce hunters and they're pursuit hunters. So a pounce hunter is a bird that either soars overhead like a red-tailed hawk, or will sit up in a tree waiting for a prey animal, a squirrel, skunk, raccoon, whatever, small raccoon, snake, to walk or move underneath them, making noise, and then they will sit up on the limb or soaring, and then they'll pounce on whatever they see from above. So that's typical of a red-tailed hawk that's soaring or sitting in a tree, or a barred owl that sits on a branch at nighttime and listens for the movement of a small prey item in the leaf litter behind them, underneath them, and they'll jump on them. And then you have pursuit hunters. these are birds that chase their prey. They capture their prey in flight. They pursue them. And these prey hunters, these pursuit hunters must be incredibly fast and maneuverable. Because if a mourning dove looks over its shoulder and seeing it's being chased by a um, Cooper's hawk, you can be absolutely certain that that mourning dove is going to try to do everything it possibly can to avoid capture. So these pursuit hunters, they're miracles of maneuverability. Okay. Some of the adaptations that make these animals is binocular vision. Okay, notice this is a northern harrier. Used to be called a long time ago called marsh hawk because they are very commonly in salt marshes, freshwater marshes, and grasslands. They have noticed the forward-facing eyes so they can get binocular vision. So it's really important to be able to judge distance. So if you think of the space, the distance between the two eyes as the base of a triangle, and they focusing on an object in the distance, the brain is figuring out what the angles are, okay? And they can judge how far away that prey animal is, just like we do. So that this ability to have this binocular vision is critical to their success, okay? Talk about talons. Okay, this is the talons of a snowy owl. The talons, if you were to measure them, were up to 3 inches or more in length. Notice they're curved, okay? And they grasp their prey and kill their prey with these very, very sharp talons. And they're hooked, as you can see in the curve, so it's very hard for the prey item to try to get away. Okay. Then they have sharp curved bill. This is obviously the beak of a bald eagle. Well, bald eagles have these sharp bills in order to slice through the prey's skin or the scales in order to get the meat inside of the animal. So this is a really good example of the hooked bill. The other birds that have these things, there's some small songbirds that have it too, but the parrots and parakeets that use it to open up fruit. Okay? So you have broad wings. Some of them have broad wings. So this is a red-tailed hawk. This is a bird of open habitats, grasslands and the tundra and things like that. They are pounce hunters. They fly overhead, see a prey item, and they pounce on it. And they use these broad wings for soaring on thermals and updraft. So as the land heats, the air rises, and they use these updrafts and thermals in order to use a flying perch. In other words, they're flying over, and if you're in Lexington, I assume many of you are in Lexington, go out to Dumback Meadows or places of that nature, you might often see red-tailed hawks in that flying perch, just soaring overhead, watching below for a prey item. Well, some of them have broad wings. This is an example. This is a barred owl. Okay. So it's not a very fast flyer. It sits on a branch typically, waits to hear a mouse or squirrel of the forest. So it's halfway between a red-tailed hawk and a peregrine falcon, okay, in terms of the wing shape. Okay, I think I need to go back because I said my internet was unstable. Anyway, these birds, this is Cooper's hawk. These are the hawks of the forest. Sometimes you'll see them out in the open, but typically in a forest. And they have these relatively shorter wings so they can fly in among the trees. They're amazing, very quick. And they are a pursuit hunter. They're chasing other birds in the forest. And then you have physical adaptations. This is a peregrine falcon. This is one of the jet fighter plane things, so it can be very, very pursuing its prey. So their longer, narrow wings are adapted for speed and for maneuverability. So you have the birds with really wide wings in order to soar around thermals and things like that. Then you have ones that have wings that are sort of in between the red-tailed hawk and the falcon for hunting in a forest where they have to be aware of making moves among trees. And then you have the falcons that are typically most commonly in the open and they're chasing their prey like a fighter jet. So some adaptations, sound dampening. Well, if you're an owl that you're sitting up in a tree and you're listening for movement below or looking for movement below at nighttime, you want to make, if you're going to jump on that potential prey, you need to be silent because otherwise you'll give warning to that prey item and it could run away. So notice at the bottom of my screen that red arrow is pointing to barbs. Those barbs are an adaptation that minimizes the amount of noise made as that wing is going through the air. It minimizes the noise causing turbulence, and therefore, when they fly, they're absolutely silent. I've had a situation where I've been out in the field and I have never heard the owl coming, but it actually brushed right through my hair and I never heard it coming at all. Okay? Then they have some owls and harriers have noticed the feathers are forming sort of a cone around their ears, okay, like this. And you can hear so much better when you put your hands making a bowl around your ears, okay? And ultraviolet vision. A lot of these presidents, many of the raptors can see ultraviolet light. This is like far beyond our ability to see, not naturally. And so the urine of many small mammals reflects ultraviolet light. We can't see it, but a lot of the birds of prey can. And this is a way that raptors can sense that light and locate their prey. Okay. Now, so with that background, we'll talk about some of the species for these year-round residents. So bald eagle, red-tailed hawk, red-shouldered hawk, sharp-shinned hawk, Cooper's hawk, eastern screech owl, barred owl, northern saw-whet owl, great horned owl, and peregrine falcon. So in New England, these are year-round residents. So here's our bald eagle, which, by the way, we almost lost it. Okay, back in the 1960s, there were only 400 pairs of bald eagles in the 48 states. Now there are over 10,000. Okay, so notice the scientific name. I really enjoy scientific names. It comes right out of the Greek, and the word has been come out of the Greek, but made to look like Latin. And so it comes out of the Greek which meant osprey or sea eagle. And then notice the specific name means white head. Well, that's a pretty good name for this bird when it's in its breeding plumage. So it's endemic to North America, nowhere else. Typically, you see them along large rivers and lakes, coastal areas, Quabbin Reservoir, Connecticut River, Merrimack River, all the bays along the Maine coast. Again, this in 1961 or two, they did a survey of bald eagle pairs in Maine, and they found five pairs in all of Maine. Now there are hundreds of them, if not thousands, in Maine. So, okay, this is a beautiful adult bird. This bird, it takes 5 years for this bird to get the full white head. So this bird is either more than 5 years, it could be 40 years old. Okay. So it's big, but notice the difference here. In terms of body length, can vary from 28 inches to 38. Or notice the wingspan. The difference can be 66 to 96 inches. So one is 50% bigger than the other. And the weight, notice some of them could weigh 6.6, about the smallest, or 14 about. Now, why? Well, females in all of the raptors that I'm aware of, I think all of our raptors, the females average bigger than males. In this case, the female bald eagle is 25% bigger than its male counterpart. The other thing that's going on as the birds in Florida and the birds in Canada the ones in Canada are much, much larger than the ones in the southern latitude. It has to do with conservation of body heat. It's the ratio between the mass versus the surface area. So if you get a male in Florida and compare it to a female in, say, Quebec, well, the one in Quebec is going to be huge. Okay? So they search for the prey while either perched on a branch or soaring overhead. And so these birds are really good hunters. They will sit up on a branch or soaring overhead, and what they'll do is they catch fish, but they also are very, very good duck hunters. And so what they'll do is they'll sit up on a branch or they'll fly over some ducks and they're watching. A duck is on the surface and it dives down and the eagle's counting and it watches where it comes up. The duck goes back down again, the eagle's counting and watches where the food comes up again. And when the eagle has a really good pattern in mind as to what that duck is doing, it then goes off as a perch and flies over where the duck has just dived and sort of hovers there, and the duck comes up and the eagle grabs it. So that's one thing. It also eats fishes and it captures its prey with its talons. Okay. It also eats fish, waterfowl. It will sometimes take reptiles and small mammals. And you see in this image here, this is a fourth year bird. If you look at the head, you can see there's some brown in the white feathers. And so they are scavengers. This is a dead Canada goose that I threw out onto the ice. It had been hit by a car. And the eagle came, figured, well, I like a free meal. That looks good. It's also a kleptoparasite. In other words, it will steal food from other birds, other animals. Okay? So one brood a year, 1 to 3 eggs. The incubation period is just a little bit over a month, but they're nestling for as many as 3 months. So it's a really, really long process. Okay? And this is a juvenile bird. Up here in Newburyport, we're seeing quite a few of them. I went out the other day with the group and we had five, all immature birds. Okay. And this is a nest. Some of these things can weigh several tons because a same pair will keep coming back to the same place over and over again. So here's a hatching year in the left-hand image. So that's a hatching year bird. In other words, that photograph was taken in the year it was hatched, okay, and fledged. And then the second year and third year bird, you can see how the plumage has changed. Okay, third year. And then you have the fourth or fifth and 50-year birds. So with skill, with time, with study, you can tell basically how old these birds are. And then after it's 50 year. So we see a lot of birds along the Merrimack River, for example, that are all in these various different plumages. And as they say, I took a group out a few days ago and we were seeing all immature birds. The next one is red-tailed hawk. This is probably the common ones that you will see around Lexington office. It was first described in Jamaica, and that's where it gets its name, Jamaicensis. Okay, and it's a buteo in Latin. That means a buzzard. Okay, that's the word for it. There's 6 subspecies and many, many different colors. You look up in your bird book. There are a lot of the red-tailed hawks in the western part of the country who look much, much darker than ours do in the east. And they're widespread. They're common throughout North America, basically far north up to tree line. It's our most common hawk, most commonly observed hawk for sure. Open terrain, deserts, scrublands, roadsides, fields and pastures. And it's common in the winter, driving along the highway. I'm sure you can see one. And here's a beautiful, this is sort of a lightly colored red-tailed hawk, really beautiful. Length of the body up to 22 inches. It can weigh almost 3 pounds. Again, males and females are different in terms of females are larger and heavier than the males. And there can be significant coloration differences among the different subspecies. Again, the ones in the west tend to be like darker. They like to perch or soar overhead. And once it detects its prey, it will pounce on it. And they again capture their food with their talons. Here is an example. They're eating mammals, voles, mice, wood rats, rabbits, snowshoe hares. They'll sometimes take snakes and birds. And hey, when they have an opportunity to eat something's dead, they'll eat that too, especially when times are tough. This is a red-tailed hawk that went into the salt marsh after a vole, and you can see it in its mouth. Okay. So one brood a year. Imagine the female can lay up to 5 eggs. So she's incubating those eggs. Primarily, the female does it for over a month, and then their male and female are taking care of those for a month and a month and a half. So now, as I was saying, there can be variation. This bird really had me. I couldn't figure out what this is because it's not a characteristic, but it's just one that is irregular plumage. If you look carefully, you can see the red-tailed hawk, but at the first, all I was seeing the breast, and I couldn't figure out what this thing was until I saw its tail. So you can get these various different plumage characteristics too. Red-shouldered hawk, again, it's Buteo. The Latin name is again for buzzard, and lineatus means it's marked with lines. Okay, we only have one subspecies in North America, and our area, New England. It's widespread from east of the Mississippi, from the Canadian border down to Texas Gulf Coast. It's uncommon, especially in the winter. Most of them withdraw out of New England and migrate somewhat south. So red-shouldered hawk, females again are slightly bigger than the males. There's a very significant difference in plumages between the ones in New England and the one in Florida. The Florida subspecies are much redder. Okay? They typically perch hunters, and when they in the understory, when they see some kind of small animal going underneath it, they will grab it, again with their talons. They eat frogs and snakes and lizards and small mammals. So it's a forest bird. This is a young one. The incubation period is a month, then a little bit of a month and a half, basically, before they fledge. And then the parents aren't done. I mean, after the female is done with the incubating the eggs and tending the young, after the bird leaves the nest, they can be fed by their parents for 8 to 10 weeks. So it's a big breeding process. This is this is a bird I photographed in the Everglades in Florida. You can see the red shoulder patch. The next one that's used to be a lot more common than it is now. This is an accipiter, okay? I mean, from the Latin meaning hawk. We only have one subspecies in New England, so that's really all you have to. This is an immature bird. This species used to be much more common in New England than it is now. It's not very common at all now. It was once widespread and once common in North America, but becoming much less common in New England. It's a deep forest hummingbird. Okay, you'll see them during migration out in the open. Uh, you see lots of them in migration. Okay, so notice the heaviest one only weighs 5 pounds, half a pound. So females again are bigger. This is one of those pursuit hunters again with the fairly long but relatively narrow wings. Okay, it's very fast and maneuverable. Okay, so they see a prey at it and they chase them through the forest, of trying to avoid branches and everything else, and they catch the prey with the talons. So 90% of their diet is small birds. Okay? So they'll be taking titmouses and maybe a cardinal and some sparrows and things of that nature. They'll also eat some small mammals, and they feed nestling birds of other species to their young. They'll locate a nest of another species of bird and basically take the nestlings out of the nest and feed them to their young. Okay? One brood a year. Now this is a closely related in the same genus. It's Accipiter for the hawk, and it was named after William Cooper, who was a zoologist. Now, the American Birding Society is there's going to be changing names. Birds that were named, the common names for birds that were named after people are likely to be changing. Okay. And we can maybe discuss that later on if you want. Okay. Okay. So they're widespread and common. Cooper's hawk. This is by far the most common accipiter in our area. I mean, I will see 20 of these for every sharp-shinned hawk, at least in my area. Okay. And they pound and a half is the largest they get. But notice the smallest male is half a pound. The largest female is a pound and a half. Very significant differences there. Okay. So little in-flight Cooper's hawks are very fast. Pursuit. There's a little story that goes along with this picture. I had a group out on a trip, and we're minding our own business in a parking lot, and first a starling whip just buzzes right by me. I mean, within feet of me. And then a second or two after comes this Cooper's hawk. The starling went right into the grass, right at the bottom of this fence pole that you see right here. Okay. Well, the starling made a mistake. The starling thought maybe it could get and fly away. Well, see how far it got. That Cooper's hawk was all over it in no time at all. So they say feed on birds, the vast majority of the diet, but they will eat small animals. The thing to keep in mind is all of these predatory birds, when conditions are really difficult or there's a very easy meal, they'll take it. I mean, they'll take carrion, something that's dead too. One brood a year, incubation period again, the female's working really hard. Okay. Now, here's for birders, this is a comparison between the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk, because a lot of people can be very confused by these two, because the smallest Cooper's hawk is about the same size as the largest sharp-shinned hawk. So while um, size is often a very important identification tool in bird watching, it can also be confusing. But notice the shapes here. Notice the head. The Cooper's hawk on the left-hand side has really a very flat head, while the head on the sharp-shinned hawk is much rounder. So that's a really good field mark. Okay. The next one is the tail. Notice the tail. On the Cooper's hawk on the left-hand side, notice how it's distinctly rounded at rest. Notice the sharp-shinned hawk. It's almost like somebody took scissors and cut them straight across. So those are really excellent field marks for your identification of these two very similar looking birds. Okay. I love owls. This is just beautiful. We have, in terms of subspecies, we have one. The interesting thing is in screech owls, we have two color morphs. Okay, we have a gray morph that you see here, and they're widespread through North America. If you go out at nighttime and where it's quiet, where there's not a lot of traffic noise, you can hear screech owls calling in the evening at nighttime. And the habitat is where there are trees for cover and nesting. They're in farmlands. In Newburyport, there are at least three breeding pairs that you can see from in the city parks. And they are throughout our area in the winter, and they withdraw from northernmost New England and Canada down into our where it's a little bit warm. But there's a red morph. So there's a gray morph, and that's a red morph. Okay. Now, red morphs and gray morphs interbreed with each other. It's no big deal. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful bird. Okay. So they're tiny. The biggest one weighs half a pound. The smallest one, just a little over a quarter of a pound. And females are always bigger. Okay. Now here, notice here, the ear tufts are down. All the muscle, all the feathers rather, are in tracts, Tracts, that are controlled by muscles. And so the bird can lift up its crest or put it down. So there it's down, here it's up. Okay. So they feed on items, they pounce on things, they feed on small mammals, small birds, they'll eat small insects, beetles, and things of that nature, grasshoppers and crickets. Okay. So the female can lay 2 to 6 eggs, month incubation period, a month of parental care. The next one is Strix viria. This is our barred owl. And notice the genus name, Strix. That's after the river on the way to hell. Okay. In any case, in Greek mythology, it's owl. It's a screech owl, and mythology said it was thought that they suck the blood of infants. They don't. Don't worry. If you have an infant, no problem. Okay. And viria means having distinct markings of different colors, which it certainly does. There are 3 subspecies throughout the United States. We only have one to worry about here in New England. The eastern half of the United States and southeastern Canada, Pacific Northwest. They like typically dense forests, but usually mixed forests. of river bottoms and swamps. So if you're near a wetland area or something, this is a bird you should be listening for. Has a very distinctive call. Its call is, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" So if you hear that, you have a barred owl, and often calling in the wintertime. So take a walk out in the wetlands someplace. These are big owls. Notice the discs around the eyes to funnel the sound into their ears. No? They typically pounce on the prey. They sit up in a tree and they pounce on something, a squirrel or something that's going. One thing interesting, some owls are fishing owls. They actually fish for owls. One of them in Africa is called Pell's fishing owl. But this is a bird, the barred owl, in the wetlands, because that's its habitat it like. It will actually wade in the water after fish. I think most folks don't know that. But it loves mammals, squirrels, mice, voles. When it has to, it will eat reptiles, amphibians, and fishes. So incubation period. The next one is, I think, one of the cutest animals on Earth, and this is the northern saw-whet owl. And a lot of people say, well, where does the name saw-whet? Well, when you're sharpening a saw with a file, it's sort of sounds like the sound of that's a saw-whet when you're sharpening a saw. These birds call sort of sounds like that. Okay, so this is obviously during a banding operation. So this is the ranges throughout the United States, basically. They're usually dense coniferous and mixed forest, wooded swamps, things of that nature. And they are actually common in New England, but they're seldom seen. They're tiny and they're nocturnal migrants, and where you get to see them is at banding stations and operations like that, unless you're incredibly fortunate um, to see one roosting during the daytime. This is a banding operation that I participated in Uxbridge, Massachusetts. So 5.3 ounces, tiny little things. What they're doing is they're looking on the feathers, the barring in the feathers under a certain ultraviolet light, and you can tell whether the gender or their age that way. Okay, that's really a beautiful little bird. Yeah. Talk about the bowl for hearing and those extraordinarily large eyes, receptors in their eyes. Now, this is not our biggest owl, but it's the biggest owl we typically see. This is great horned owl. Notice it was first described from a specimen in Virginia. That's where it gets its specific name. Virginians. This subspecies in New England, in North America, there are lots of them, but we only have one. Big. So the range is from the subarctic timberline to the lowlands all the way into South America. They like woodlands, urban habitats, deserts. They're really quite common in New England. And again, if you could go out in a woodland or someplace in the evening time and listen, you may well be able to hear them. Hoo. Male and female have two different songs, but you'll recognize them. This would happen to be one I photographed in New Mexico. But notice the difference in weight again of these 2 pounds to 5.5. So some of these birds are really, really huge. Here's one in nest. This is a photograph I took in Newbury, Massachusetts here, on the nest with a very large young one. They, again, search from prey, typically from a perch, and they'll pounce on it. One way that I found to find a great horned owl nest, if I'm walking in the woodlands, I smell skunk during the daytime. Great horned owls feed on skunks. That's one of their prey items. And they'll bring the carcass of the skunk back to the nest to feed it to their young ones. So some large prey. Okay. Okay, in incubation period, the female is incubating these for over a month, and then they're in the nest for 42 days about. Talk about looking at you. Really, this is has not fledged yet. Long-eared owl. Now, this is one of the hardest owls for me to find. This is one I photographed in Salisbury Beach State Reservation. There's one subspecies in New England. This is one we see. So they're grasslands, also open conifer and deciduous woodlands. They're uncommon in New England. They're very often difficult to see because they nest and roost in dense vegetation. There is a small woodland in Lexington. It's behind one of the school. It used to be a school, and I'm not remembering the name. It used to be a school, is now condominiums, and there's a athletic field back there. And there's a woodland. Many years they have been roosting in those pine trees. Okay, long-eared owl, not very big, but a really nice looking bird. The hunting, they fly low over grasslands, typically over area or through open forest, searching for prey, small mammals, small birds, things like chipmunks, small squirrels, things of that nature. Can you imagine this? The female can lay between 2 and 10 eggs, average 4.5. A lot of eggs. The incubation period, 30 days, nesting period, and so doing this, but a lot of these owls, young owls, what they'll do is they'll be in a nest and then they disperse throughout the tree. So they're in a nest for the first 20 days, say. And after that, they start dispersing using their beak and their talons to move through a tree onto another branch where they can hide. Okay, peregrine falcon. If you went back in history and you went to the Foro Romano and you saw Julius Caesar there or Cicero and you went up to him and said Falco peregrinus, they would know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, so it's wandering falcon is what that there are. There are three uh, subspecies in North America. There are 16 others worldwide. So this is a widespread. The one thing to keep in mind, we almost killed off all of our peregrine falcons. Basically, all the peregrine falcons east of the Rocky Mountains are not native to North America. These are birds that were reintroduced from populations in Europe and Africa. So what we're seeing in the east here, when you see this bird here, this is not the same subspecies that would have been here originally. So this is a really important, we killed them off either by DDT or by shooting, okay? Fortunately, they're making a strong comeback. And they actually nest under the Route 1 bridge in Newburyport. Route 1 bridge goes over the Merrimack River in Newburyport, and they nest underneath that bridge, okay? They're found on all continents except Antarctica. I've seen them in the Galapagos Islands. Okay, they like to be open landscapes, barrier islands, and they nest on city buildings. For example, they breed on city buildings in Boston, uh, Portland, Maine, a lot of different places. And as I mentioned, under the Route 1 bridge in Newburyport. So they can weigh up to 3.5 pounds. Females, again, larger than the males. This is one that is in the second/third year. It's not completely molted into its adult plumage that you see here. You can see a little bit of brown in the wings. And it hunts by if the like a duck or a pigeon or a glossy ibis or something even that big, the peregrine will be up above it and it will dive from behind and from above and behind and just basically hit it with its talons, basically breaking the back of the prey bird and it basically capture it before it hits the ground. It eats primarily birds. Bats on the Galapagos Island, the peregrine falcons feed on bats and storm petrels. And here, notice, I don't think this young bird would ever want another peregrine falcon to see it eating fish. But when conditions are really, really difficult, these birds will resort to whatever is possible and either steals from other birds or it will eat carrion, which is what's happening here. Juvenile bird. This bird was probably when I photographed it. This was on the south end of Plum Island. Probably had been out of the nest for only a month or so. So a real young bird. But you can still see on the face that sideburns. That is a really good character field mark of that bird. Then we have some winter residents that only come down the winter. Now northern harriers used to breed in my area. They do still breed up in northern Maine, northern New England. But this one, notice the scientific name. It's circus. Okay, it's after a mythological hawk, which named for its circling flight. Okay, so and it was first discovered or described somewhere in Hudson Bay. That's where it gets its name. Okay. And its love's widespread in North and Middle America, large undisturbed tracts, wetlands, grasslands, the tundra. Okay. Uh, so up in Maine where they breed, you'll see them over these large areas of wetlands. Okay. During the wintertime, we see them on the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge, Salisbury Beach State Reservation, places that look like tundra during the wintertime. There's a very sexual dimorphism in both size and in plumage. This is a male that you're seeing here. Birders refer to them as gray ghosts, and we very seldom see them. We very much more often see the females and the young females. But this is a photograph of what I took in Nome, Alaska. What a beautiful bird. Notice when it's flying. Notice how its eyes are facing down. It's basically flying low over the area looking for prey items. This is a juvenile female. And how they fly. They fly into the wind. They fly very low to the ground and they fly into the wind. Well, by flying into the wind, the flow of the air over the wings, according to Bernoulli's principle, provides the lift that lets the bird fly. And so it can fly very well at very slow speeds looking for snakes, rodents, things of that, reptiles. So they'll typically do if there's an open area, they will start on one end of that open area and they'll fly into the wind. If they don't catch it, they'll fly higher and go and start and do it over again. So going back very quickly and then very slowly coming back into the wind. See, look at boy, she's definitely looking down. Okay. Okay. So 4 to 5 eggs. Notice that one male can have as many as 5 female mates, usually 1 or 2, but he's hunting all the time for the females and the males. So he has a big job. This is a photograph I took at Salisbury Beach State Reservation. It's feeding on some kind of duck that it caught. And I put this image in here because notice, okay, notice the throat. That's the crop. Okay, you have the esophagus and the crop. And so birds, in order to be able to store food, either for themselves and then during the non-breeding time, or to carry food back to their young ones, it strips the meat off its prey item and it only swallows it part way. So when it can fly back to its nest, it regurgitates that food for its young one. And this bird has that crop full of duck. Okay. Rough-legged hawk, we only get a few of these during the winter. This is come in 2 different color morphs. You have light morphs and dark morphs. This is a bird that takes the place. They are in southern northern Asia, North America. It's their primary breeding area is the tundra, grasslands and salt marshes. In the winter, we get rough-legged hawks over the salt marshes in the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge. So again, big size difference. And there are 2 color morphs. This is a dark morph. So it again flies. What this does, if you're familiar with a kingfisher, okay, or a tern that will hover in the air, they face into the wind and they hover because remember their normal habitat is north of tree line. So they don't have a lot of trees to sit in. So a behavioral update is they can hover and then they dive on their prey. So that's a really good feel. Now, red-tailed hawks will also do that occasionally. But if you're out birding in an open area like the Park River National Island and you see a hawk that's hovering like this, that you should be thinking, I need to make sure that's whether that's a rough-legged hawk or not. Okay. So this is a dark morph. I'm sorry, this was a light morph. This is a dark morph here, really black. Okay. So the two birds that are common that you could mistake these for is the red-tailed hawk on the left and the rough-legged hawk on the right. Okay, notice the difference in the bill. It's pronounced. Notice that the red-tailed hawk has a huge bill, but the rough-legged hawk has a tiny one. So if you're looking at, because of the variation in the plumage of the red-tailed hawk, they could look quite similar to a rough-legged hawk. So you want to look, and they're about the same size. So if it's perched, you want to look at that bill. Is it a tiny little bill that you see on a beak that's on the rough-legged hawk, or is it a massive one that's on a red-tailed hawk? So Merlin, another falcon, the old name was pigeon hawk. Notice the scientific note is falco, just like on the peregrine falcon, and cumbarius, okay, for pertaining to doves. When I started birding way in the 61, I knew this as pigeon hawk, okay? Across North America, open areas or semi-open areas. And during the wintertime, I'm sorry, most of them withdraw from New England. Excuse me. Okay, so this is notice they weigh up half a pound. We're talking a bird that weighs about the same thing as a northern flicker. Okay. Now, this is a merlin that's caught a shorebird. Okay. So these merlins are very, very fast pursuit hunters. Okay. Where the peregrine typically goes after its prey, diving down on it, very often these merlins will feed the other and go up underneath. So they feed on birds, vast majority birds, but they'll eat bats, other small mammals, insects when they're hungry. Incubation period is about a month, then they're nestlings for about a month. And the last two species I'd like to talk about today is the short-eared owl and the snowy owl. Now, again, I have these as eruptive species because short-eared owls, we pretty much get them every year, a couple on the Park River National Island. But the numbers, whether they're going to be coming or how many, is really unpredictable until they arrive. Snowy owls, there are hardly any around, at least I haven't seen any around my area, where some years on a 3-hour field trip one time we saw 13 of them. Okay. If I took you out on a 3-hour field trip right now, I don't think I'd find you any. Okay. So this is short-eared owl. This is actually a photograph I took in Alaska. Okay. And there are one of our most widespread raptors with populations in the Northern Hemisphere, South America, and the Galapagos Islands. I saw one in the Galapagos Islands. So open country prairies, they they are the counterpart. They feed in a very similar way to that of the harrier, northern harrier. So as they say, in New England, it's an eruptive species. Sometimes we don't get any. Okay. But when they fly, one of the real key field marks is they look like a huge a huge moth. Okay. So short-eared owls, like northern harriers, they feed in a similar way. They fly back and forth over an area, grassland, or over the salt marsh, looking for prey. So northern harriers hunt during the day time, and the short-eared owls, they sort of say, okay, harriers, you hunt during the daytime, and I'm going to hunt in the twilight. In other words, I'm going to be a crepuscular hunter. I hunt in the early morning and the late afternoons. Okay, so that's how they sort of divide up what's going on. But notice the shape, how big the head is. Huge head on this thing. Okay. They eat moles and voles and mice and things like that. Lemmings, nesting terns. They can be a they can be a problem in some seabird nesting colonies. Okay. But you see this really these broad wings. It doesn't need speed. Okay, it's just going to fly back and forth across an area looking for prey item and then pounce on them. Tiny little, you can see why it's called short-eared owl, the tiny little feathers. And the last species is this one is our bubo for eagle owl, and first described from Scandinavia, and so that's why it's named. There are no subspecies. Apparently, no matter where you are, the birds in terms of the general sizes and coloration are the same. They're circumpolar in their distribution. They inhabit open spaces, scrub-like tundra. I'd traveled up to Barrow Utqiagvik in northernmost above the Arctic Circle, and I've seen them nesting there. Okay, that's on the tundra. Okay, it's an eruptive species again. Sometimes we have a bunch of them. Sometimes we have almost none of them. They can. This is a big bird, up to 6.5 pounds. Took this photograph at Salisbury Beach State Reservation. So they're diurnal and they can hunt at nighttime. They will do both. Okay? And they typically sit on the ground and they wait for some prey items and they pounce on it. Some snowy owls overwinter in the North Atlantic where they sit on icebergs and they feed on ducks. So this is a tough bird. Any question in mind that this bird was watching me? Okay, so they eat small mammals, especially lemmings. Okay, but they'll take ptarmigan, that's a grouse-like bird of the north, waterfowl, as they said, out in the ocean, rabbits, squirrels, seabirds. Notice the feathers around the beak. Handsome. Some of them can be very dark. Nesting period, the nests are on the ground in the tundra. Now, the little story here, because I really caution people not to get too close to these owls. Okay, then obviously I'm very close to this owl, but I didn't go to the owl; it came to me. Okay, so this is Salisbury Beach State Reservation, where there's a information kiosk, and I was minding my own business, and I wasn't seeing anything particular. I turned around, and there's a snowy owl that was looking for me. I really implore you, do not get too close to these animals. Okay. They need time to rest and they need time to feed. And this is the end of my presentation, and this was the end of a pigeon. This adult peregrine falcon took its prey. Okay, at this time, I am done. I'm just trying to see whether I could, if there are there's some chat lines I could. Yeah, some folks are indicating that the winter hasn't been cold, although it's been pretty cold right now. That sometimes when we have warm winters, northern parts of the Merrimack River, for example, do not freeze up. So some of these owls, I'm sorry, some of these eagles from farther north don't come down. Really very cold winters, we get a lot of them because a lot of all the ponds and rivers are frozen over. Uh, so I don't know. I don't see anything else.
Just asked about the effect of avian flu on our raptors, if you can speak to that.
Well, yeah, I don't know particularly about avian flu with our raptors, but I'm sure that all of our bird populations are going to be negatively impacted. I have taken down all of my feeders. I'm not because I don't want to attract a bunch of birds together. Most of these birds are going to be, they look for tens of thousands or millions of years. They have been able to survive in winters. So it is not absolutely necessary that we feed them. I feed them because I love to see them. So I'd recommend that if you're feeding backyard birds, that you do one of two things. Either you take your feeders down so you're not attracting, or you're very conscientious in washing your feeders with Clorox and things like that. And then of course rinsing them very carefully. So we're not spreading the avian flu among the birds. That would be my suggestion.
All right. Thank you, Bill, so much for this talk. My name is Susan Eastland on the programming team at Cary Library.
Thank you. I,
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Did you want to answer this last question, Bill, in the chat, or?
oh yeah, yeah. This happens to be avian flu on the raptors. Well, I think all the birds could be affected. And the other thing is about rat poisons. That's a real problem, okay, where people putting rat poisons out, the rats are eating them, which they're supposed to eat, but then the predatory birds are eating the rats that have the rat poison in them. And there are there are indications that many raptors are dying because of this poisoning. So I don't know what influence you could have about not putting those poisons, or surely not putting them out indiscriminately, because you could kill off most of the rats with your rat poison, but you'll never get them all. But if you kill all your predatory, your hawks and eagles and owls, then there'll be nothing natural to control your rodents and things like that. So yeah, it's there are very definite stories of raptors dying, owls dying, and then analyze and find that they've been eating rat poison. Anyway, so I thank you for being a very able substitute at the last moment. That was good.
No problem. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in a little late today and bearing with us with the technological problems. And thank you so much, Bill, for your monthly talk. And we will see you next month.
Okay, I look forward to it. Thank you very much.